Welcome to the Village Well podcast, brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Welcome back to the Village Well podcast. Good to see you, Josh.
Good to see you, Jen.
It's been pretty busy here at Village Well.
Yeah, we have a short film festival going on. Some comedy folks have made some really fun short films, and it's pretty busy out here today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to watch them. This is our second film festival that we've made at Village Well. The first one we did was for Halloween. We did a horror short film festival. We've got a horror writer on staff and a number of filmmakers on staff. So we got the idea to put out a call for short films, and we put together a festival. It was so fun to get submissions from people. And one of the criteria is the filmmakers had to be within visitation range. You know, they had to come here for the event. So it's like local filmmakers, which there are plenty of.
Totally.
In this area.
And we already have like a big comedy scene. We do open mic nights and stuff. And so it's been fun kind of giving people a platform to share their art. And I think it should be a fun night. So.
Yeah. I've learned so much about comedy just from working here and interacting with baristas and booksellers, people who this is their job to pay the bills. Well, some of the bills, and some of it they pay through building their comedy careers.
Yeah.
The likes of Jared Kassabaum, as listeners who have been longtime listeners know, was one of the original hosts of this. And then we've got Claire Dalton and Rod Maximo. They in this very room run a open mic every Monday night.
Yeah, so come on out. It's a fun time.
Come on out. It's super fun. So anyway, I'm excited for this week's episode. You and Sam Tillis, one of our baristas and a member of our marketing team, interviewed. Tell me the name of the guest.
Akbar Gbajabiamila. He's a great guy. He came into the store just kind of by accident, and he just Googled like bookstore near me. And
does he live near here?
Yeah. He's a local LA guy. He grew up in South Central, and he came in and saw that we had interviewed Marin Fader, Hakeem Olajuwon's biographer.
Oh, right. Okay.
And mentioned he grew up in a Nigerian household, and Hakeem was like a big hero of his.
Oh, right.
And we started chatting, and he came on the pod and was an awesome guest. So
tell me, his book is Everyone Can Be a Ninja. So what does he mean by ninja? Is that like a metaphorical ninja?
Yeah.
Or an actual ninja?
Yeah. I think maybe a bit of both. But so Akbar is one of the hosts of American Ninja Warrior, which for those of you who don't know, is this awesome reality TV show kind of competition obstacle course where contestants will, qualify for this obstacle course and then run through it on live TV. And Akbar is one of the folks who calls the runs.
He's not a contestant. He's like the host of that show?
Yeah. And, I actually was a fan of the show before meeting him. So that was really cool.
So when he came in the store, did you recognize him?
I didn't, but as soon as we started chatting, I was like, oh, that's that guy.
Oh, nice.
Because he also... he's a former NFL athlete. He's played, football and basketball his whole life, going back to being a kid. And so he brings that, and he's also like a media personality and sports commentator. So he brings that background to American Ninja Warrior and has kind of like applied his perspective as an athlete to that. So He's a great guy. It was a lot of fun. And the book is kind of using the show and sports as a metaphor for life. So how can you think of, of course, on the show, it's literal an obstacle course, but how can you think about overcoming obstacles in your own life? And how can you be inspired by folks who, some of them have disabilities or addictions or things they struggle with. And as they overcome it on the show, it can be a instructive metaphor for how to live your own life.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I did listen to the interview and it was really cool. And I think our audience is going to like it too.
Yeah.
So should we cue it up?
Let's do it.
All right. Enjoy the show.
All right, welcome back to the Village Well podcast. My name is Josh Stretton Carlson, filling in for Jen today. I'm the producer here on the pod, and joining me as my co-host today.
Hi, I'm Sam here.
Sam works in our cafe and is also a up-and-coming co-host of the podcast.
Okay, glad to be here again.
Did a great interview with Marin Fader about Hakeem Olajuwon. And today we're very lucky to be joined by Akbar Gbajabiamila, former NFL player, host of American Ninja Warrior, media personality in general.
And now a writer. Well, he's been a writer.
Yeah. And we're here to talk about Everyone Can Be a Ninja. So Akbar, first question, this is a really deeply personal book.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of every interview, we want to just give folks a chance to kind of pitch their book, give us a little elevator pitch. So what is, in a few sentences, Everyone Can Be a Ninja?
Everyone Can Be a Ninja is a story about overcoming obstacles in your life, in your lives. And you think about just, American Ninja Warrior, and you think about all of the different obstacles you see on the show. And what I did in Everyone Can Be a Ninja is I took my own personal stories. I took former athletes, former ninjas, friends who were athletes, and I told their stories almost in the same way we set up our obstacles. And every chapter is built around a personal story on how to overcome. So it's the underdog path to success is essentially what Everyone Can Be a Ninja is about. So people see the title, it's a little misleading because you think, oh man, like I don't want to be a ninja warrior. No, but you want to be a ninja warrior in life and in your own life and being able to have the tools to master those things. Because the one thing I know for sure is that when we go through something and obstacles in our lives, sometimes you're going, I'm the only one going through this. And then this book really helps to go, wait a second, everyone has this. Everyone can be a ninja.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There we go,
Yeah.
man. Awesome. Do you want to talk us through just a little bit about your bio and what led you up to writing this?
Yeah, the inspiration was after years and years. I've been now hosting American Ninja Warrior for 14, 15. I'm even losing track of the years now. But somewhere along the line in 2017, I started kind of like, wow, like this is really cool. And I have the fortunate opportunity to call a lot of these, call all of these runs for the ninjas, and I get to read their bios. And reading their bios, I was just like, yo, man, these stories are so touching. And like, oh, I've been through that. Oh, I can relate to that. Or I know someone who's going through that. And then it just hit me, and I'm going, wait a second. This is a microcosm of life, the show, the athletes who compete on it, the actual obstacles that are set up. And I thought I wanted to tell a story. I'm too young to write an autobiography, but I wanted to be able to take different parts of my life, my father's life, the things that have happened around me, the people who I know, the things that have happened to them. And I really wanted to write a book that was just going to inspire people to be able to overcome obstacles. There's nothing more glorious than if you're a fan of the show, you see me going absolutely nuts. It's not fake. Because one thing, I don't know why I'm this way, to be honest with you, but I love to see other people succeed. And it just really, I guess if we're honest, I'm just a big old cheerleader is what I've turned into. I'm a former NFL guy who's turned into a cheerleader because I love watching them. And when they hit that buzzer and they've overcome all of these obstacles, I'm going like, that's what it's all about right there,
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you just said, it reminds me of this quote that I loved, just the kind of underscoring this idea of like the universality of struggle and this underdog story, that everyone has their own story, everyone has their own struggles, and that almost like the obstacle course is like a metaphor for life. And also this kind of idea of like an illusion of greatness, how in American society, we're so obsessed with being the greatest that we kind of lose sight of like, well, you work so hard to get to where you are right now. Have some appreciation of that first. And so what you said here was most of the ninjas who step up to the starting line know they won't get through the course. Most aren't there to win. They're there because they fought for their chance to be there. They're everyday Americans. Some have diseases. Others struggle with a disability or an addiction. They are underdogs. They aren't supposed to be there, but none of that matters because at that moment, with the cameras rolling and the crowd cheering, they have already won. They have become great, even if they aren't the greatest. So like that part just kind of struck such a chord with me because, yeah, they're so stoked to be there. That like their families are there. They're on the stage. The crowd's cheering. The cameras are rolling. So like, do you think this kind of illusion of greatness in American society is like maybe harmful a little bit, and could get in the way for like kids or people trying to improve? And like, how do you suggest we kind of combat that?
Yeah, there are probably many recipes in being able to tackle this, but I'm reminded of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I remember there was a reporter maybe a year or two back that said, essentially because they didn't get to the championship or whatever it was, he said, like, do you consider this a failure? And then he talked about and referenced Michael Jordan and all the years that he didn't win a championship before he actually won. He goes, was that a failure? And he's asking the reporter, he flipped him, like, is it a failure? It is a failure. And he's like, you're right. Because, someone would look at a season for an athlete and go, well, you didn't make it to the Super Bowl. You didn't make it to the championship. So it's a fail. Like, no, it's an opportunity to learn. And so for these athletes, for these ninjas who step up in these massive moments, it's the season, so to speak, of what they've gone through and what they've overcome to get to that moment. And so many might look and go, oh, they didn't hit a buzzer. They went out on the first or second obstacle. It's done. They're a failure. Like, no, they worked like crazy. And what made it personal for me was, I had this dream, obsessive dream. I grew up here in Los Angeles and, I witnessed the greatness of the Showtime era for the Los Angeles Lakers and Magic Johnson and Byron Scott and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I could go on and on and on. And I wanted to be great. I was infatuated, obsessed, intoxicated by greatness. Muhammad Ali, Michael Jackson. These are just some of the people that I watched growing up as an 80s kid. And I just wanted to be that. And so I fast forward to my journey playing high school basketball, then transitioning into football, and then going to college and then going undrafted. And there was this kind of this shame that, I didn't get drafted. Like, I'm not as valuable, like I'm a failure. I felt these things. And then I didn't even have the NFL career that I wanted. Like, in my mind, I was going to play 10 years. I was going to have Super Bowl rings, go into the playoffs. None of that happened. And what you then start to do is you start to devalue all of the hard work that went into getting there. And it was even hard for me when people were like, man, but you made it to the NFL. Yeah. Wait, hold on. Like, that's hard as hell to do. That is hard as hell to do. And it just made me start realizing, like, whoa, you can be so obsessed with that you don't even take the other wins. I won't call them small wins because they're not small wins. They're the other wins in life that you've taken. And I think the only way to remedy this is to have athletes, people in general, just be present in the things. And I had this thing with my kids, and it's going to sound super corny, but we did this last night as like a part of a devotion during dinner was, what are the things that you're grateful for? And we just started talking about some of the small things, waking up in the morning, being able to just breathe, health. Like, it's all good until you don't have health. And I remember, like, I tore my Achilles tendon, and it was the first time I had like a major surgery like that. I've had knee surgery and stuff like that, but you find a way. But the Achilles shuts you down. And I'm like, I took for granted just being able to do the simple things, needing my teammate to help me out, to take a shower. You have to humble yourself. And so it's easy to take for granted the things that you do so easily, the things that you have access to. How many times has somebody said good morning to you? Hey, good morning. And I was like, no, wait, it is a good morning.
It's a blessing.
It's a blessing. So being able to be present in the moment, but it's hard to be present when we've got so many distractions around us, right? So you can't even appreciate the things that come so easy, but we're also so very blessed and fortunate to have,
Yeah, absolutely. I really resonate with that. That's something that my swim coach would talk about all the time in high school, is like, the thing to be proud of isn't your performance in the race. The thing to be proud of is all the work you put in to give yourself a chance on the block. Like, the thing to be proud of is all the moments when no one is watching, when like you're in the pool and it sucks and you missed your time or whatever, but you're trying as hard as you can, and you're showing up for yourself. You're showing up for your relay, your teammates. And something I wanted to hit on, because sports can be such a powerful metaphor, is how do you view, especially for folks that didn't grow up on a team, didn't grow up playing sports, how do you view this as a lesson just for life in general, as a metaphor?
I think sports is the ultimate preparation for life, because you get your wins, you get your losses, and it's constantly this up and down, ebb and flow type of thing when it comes to sports. And there's nothing that consistently preps you for life, like sports. Because whether it's in practice or the moments that you have when you go, oh man, I don't want to go to practice, or this practice beat my butt. And it was just like, but you still come back. Why? Why are you coming back? Right? You learn to be able to build that callus, against stress, against, self-doubt, against worry, against all of these different things that you start experiencing as a father, as an employee or as an employer, whichever way that is. Like, I think sports, to me, it constantly stresses and tests you on those types of things. And that's why, for me, like my kids, I don't have my kids playing sports because I want them to be, the next professional athlete. If that happens, great. But you miss out on the opportunity when you let up in some of those more stressful moments. And so, I love that your coach, seems like your coach had a real influence in your life in that manner, like being able to push you past, your comfort level. Because all of us, we all want to stay in this homeostasis where it's just like, here's the norm. This is where I want to stay. I'm comfortable. I'm good. I don't need to step outside. Imagine if you had everything in your house, everything you could just get an apple.
Which
you
it
could
feels like nowadays,
right.
a lot of the time. Yeah.
It has become our own fortress. Like, well, you don't even want to leave. Mm-hmm. You hear this, especially for, some communities that, they've got everything and they go, oh, you don't leave the bubble, right? Because the bubble is very comfortable. And so you don't stretch yourself to explore other areas, other opportunities outside of the bubble. And so you can become lost. Your views, your perspectives can become warped because you're just like, and the same thing happens personally when you don't stretch yourself. Your views and things can become warped because you're only inside of this comfortable bubble,
Totally.
Yeah.
That could just be validating you constantly.
Yeah.
Not pushing you. I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Confirmation bias,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Totally, Totally. 100%. I want to kind of go back to what you mentioned about, getting to the NFL and maybe not achieving like your dreams of getting rings or something. And you're talking to people and you feel this shame at despite having these like tremendous accomplishments, and I like the part where you talked about your book. It was very kind of touching and poignant, where you were talking about how in your youth you carried a lot of shame initially about your like Nigerian background and your immigrant background, and even your name. Yeah. And that's kind of, you described that your biggest shame, or the biggest thing you got bullied for, was your name. Yeah. And then it struck me as so profound when you broke down the meaning of your name, which I'd like you to kind of touch into a little bit about how it like honestly informed all these themes in your book and informed all these things in your life. And I was like, it seemed like divine providence, or like that. It was literally written in the stars for you, written in your name to rise above these challenges and rise above this shame or biases or kind of self, insecurity or things like that.
It was crazy, guys. It was so crazy. So first off, I grew up in an all black neighborhood, or majority black neighborhood here in LA, South Los Angeles, in the Crenshaw community. Very, very proud of my neighborhood that I grew up in, despite the challenges that we had growing up. And to me, it made sense. My parents came to this country from Nigeria, and I just thought, well, everybody who's black originated from Africa. I'm like, duh. And I would get to school, and so I lived this kind of double life in a way, because at school, I was this quote unquote, and not that I'm trying to differentiate, but just, for this story purposes, but at school, I was this African kid, amongst African American kids, but I didn't see that. I just said we're all the same, right? At home, I lived a very Nigerian. I didn't eat the Fruit Loops growing up. I wasn't eating, and we had very traditional, I would be eating gari with sugar and water, and I would be eating, eba and egusi soup and, stockfish and all this other different stuff that was just, I come home, go to school and tell them what I was like, what? You eat goat? You African? And they would tease me. I was like, but you're African too. They were like, no, my mama from Louisiana. I'm like, no. But before that, and it was just this disconnect. So it was just this constant bullying. And I didn't know it at the time that, there was this whole process that goes into naming a kid. I gave my father the honor to name my kids because it is passed down that way, that you give your parents the opportunity to name me, because whatever it is that they do, they figure it out. It's like, my dad got to teach me how, so I can name my kids, hopefully. But yeah, it tells a story. So when you tell your name, they go, I know. So Akbar is Arabic, means great. Oluwakemi means God pampers me. Idowu means born after twins. And then Gbajabiamila is big man come save me, which comes from our great great grandfather, who is a 7-footer in his town. And whenever people would have issues, they would call on him, and that nickname then turned into our last name. And that's kind of the origin of the story. And so I didn't learn that story until later on, but you're right. It does kind of come full circle, but I had to internalize all of this pain from my peers who would just, oh man, they would not let up. And one day, and I actually, don't judge me, but it was actually right around the time Coming to America came out, and I was a little kid. I shouldn't watch. There was too much cussing at that time. There was a lot of cussing in it, but it was one of the all-time great movies. And I just remember where there's a scene where Eddie Murphy is on the balcony and there's like, shut up, F you, F you. He goes, yes, F you too. and he's embracing it, and I thought, that's it. And I just remember me taking that on, on top of my father telling me, make them say your name. And so when people would say, yes, I am African. Yes. And I would just be out, in the middle of the campus, on the playground saying and professing, yes, I am African. And then it just kind of like, yo, he's crazy. And then it flipped.
You owned it.
Yeah, I owned it. Instead of running away from it, I just owned it. And I just leaned heavy into it. It even takes me back to 8 Miles when, there was that famous scene when Eminem goes, yes, my mom does live in a trailer park. I am this, I am that. And they're in that rap battle. And it was just like, dang, like, there's nowhere else to go.
They can't say anything.
You can't say anything. You owned it all, and that was a real pivotal moment for me where I had to learn to be comfortable with who I was, regardless of what other people thought or said.
So you talk about your roots a lot. You also talk about, I think there's a lot of positive masculinity in this book too. And we talk so much. I was talking to Sam about this.
I love that. Positive masculinity.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think we, as a culture, we've done a very intentional job of critiquing toxic masculinity. Yeah. But I think it's also important to be you talk about being a good son, a good father, a good brother. And I guess, at our best, what does it mean to you to be a man, to be a good man?
I appreciate you, Josh, for saying that, because I do think we're in a time right now, don't get me started, because I don't believe that, all things men are toxic or is negative. And I believe there is a lot more good in masculinity than there is negativity. And so for me, there were I'm not where I am today if it wasn't for the positive influences that I had in my life, both women and men. But predominantly, I think of Mr. Copeland, who was a mentor of mine at Audubon. I think of Mr. Baptiste, my vice principal in elementary. Mr. Hall, my 5th grade teacher, Coach Garrett, my high school football coach, Coach Willie West, who was my high school basketball coach. The list goes on and on. The guys who literally took me in as a community and helped to raise me. I always say my parents raised me because I grew up in, in a 2-parent household, but also Crenshaw raised me. And when I say Crenshaw raised me, those are all the mentors who looked up for me. Even some of the hardcore gangbangers that I grew up with that I knew, yo, don't mess with him. We're making the bad choices, but that dude, them African boys, what they used to call us, them African boys, don't mess with them. There was kind of a coolness in that, we kind of got protection. They're looking out for us because they knew what my parents were about. And so, even at that, there's a lot of positive male influences that came in my life. So it was very intentional that I wanted this book to highlight that, because it bothers me to my core when I see how men are portrayed, or just natural masculine energy, natural masculine instincts is constantly critiqued. Well, it should be done this way. And I do think that we live in a world where there's enough space to have feminine and masculine energy, and for them to coexist without it being scrutinized. I don't think masculine energy needs to be intimidating. I think it needs to be invited in. You know what I mean? Because if it wasn't for my dad, there was a time, and people could say, "Oh wow, I can't believe," but there was a time. I tell this story. I think I tell this story in there, where I had a friend of mine who was a good friend of mine, and he decided to go a different route. He wanted to join a gang, and he was pressuring me, and I was like, "Nah, man, come on, man." I was like, "All right, man, this is my boy." You know what I mean? And I didn't see him as, the dude in the gang. This is my guy. And so I said, "All right." And word got out, and it got to my brother. And my brother went home and told my dad. And my dad was like, "You want to be a ganga banga." In my head, I'm laughing because I'm like, "Dad, you're messing it all up. There's no ganga banga." My gangbanger, but I don't even know if they use the term gangbanger anymore. But, that was his, and he just slapped me up, whooped me up. Boy, man, I was more afraid of my dad than I was getting shot. You know what I mean? And that changed. I went back to the homie. He was like, "Yo, man, I can't do it. I can't get put on." And he was like, "Oh, man, come on. I can't get put on, man. Y'all can do whatever y'all want. But that man over there, my father, he will tear me up." And to me, that has been lost a little bit, because there is now this apprehension about leading as a man, and as far as leading your household and taking different approaches. It was like, no, let's lean into that, because it was life-changing to me, and it was life-changing to so many others. And now, even me, I'll raise my hands. I'm sometimes conflicted because I get a lot of this feedback about, you can't lead like that. That's toxic masculinity. I'm like, well, if there's toxic masculinity, is there toxic femininity? You know what I mean? We don't lean into that. In fact, I don't think that term doesn't even exist, because that would be considered, it's sacrilegious if you said toxic femininity. You'll get your head ripped off. You know what I mean? So I hope that this conversation will embrace, more people leaning in and lifting up, positive masculinity. I think the only way to really change the narrative is to own what it means to have positive masculinity. And you go, well, what do you mean own it? There's going to be a lot of people giving a lot of feedback, and it creates paralysis by analysis, right? You're constantly analyzing, well, am I not? And I'll tell you something that was told to me by a speech coach of mine, and I didn't even notice that I did this. I'll kind of wrap it full circle here. But for me, being a 6'6" black man, there is this narrative about black folks. Let's just put it out there. Oh, they're the thuggish, they're criminals, they're all this other stuff, negative stuff. And so I subconsciously see, when I walk by people, I see their mannerism change, because I'm supposed to be this intimidating figure. And I'm telling you, I didn't even know I was doing this subconsciously. A speech coach is watching me. And what happens when I walk into a room, I make myself smaller. I roll my shoulder forward, almost as to say, but again, this is happening subconsciously. I'm not here to harm anybody. I'm just, and he's like, "No, stand upright. Own that. You're like, God made you 6'6" and big. Own it." And I didn't realize I was doing that, but that's because everyone else outside, and the narrative was that, like this size being this color was a thing that was not good. And so I wanted to diffuse it by minimizing my strength or minimizing who I was. And so when I bring it around full circle, it's just this like, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to challenge what masculinity is. And so I would just say, hey, look, I respect that that's what you think, but I have to own who I am, because if we're not comfortable in masculinity, and this is not a right or wrong thing, right? It is just, this is who I am. This is how I think. I tell this to my wife all the time. I say, hey, babe, you have your maternal instinct. I have my paternal instinct. And both of those things should be elevated. There's enough space for both things to be elevated to where it's not me versus you. And same thing in society is just that where to me, the thief of joy is comparison. And so when we start comparing ourselves to, the alternatives, then that's when I think we get in trouble, because it just steals the joy of even being masculine and being able to lean in on that.
Well, that's one of the beautiful things about this book is like when I think about people who are like claiming masculinity in our culture, it's all fake stuff. It's like these Andrew Tate type people who are talking about just like abusing women and being a bully and all this stuff that is just like so fake, and they teach young boys like, this is how you be a man. You got to be like, basically a criminal. And I think that's why in this book, as you're talking about, no, here's what being a man is about. It's about showing up for people.
Yes.
It's about loyalty. It's about working hard, being a good father, being present in your kids' lives. Like those are things that these like fake masculinity guys would never do. You're talking about loving your spouse. You're talking about honoring your parents. Being part of a team, having a goal, like being very driven, being very intentional with your work, like that. I feel very blessed in my life that my father has been a very good role model for me in those ways. He had times during his career where he was working 16-hour days, but he still made time to play with me. He still made, we would like, I would lean on his shoulder and we'd be watching the Clippers. I'm sorry, I know you're a Lakers fan, but he modeled for me like, being a man isn't all this like BS, just like performative stuff. It's also like being there for your family, And so as you're talking about this book, one of the big themes we're talking about family is also religion and your faith. And something that I think is so powerful is you talk about just this need for a higher power. And, for a lot of folks, whether that's God, whether that's nature, whether that's community, like, why do you think it's so important to have something to believe in bigger than yourself?
Because we're here temporarily. And we all know it. And I'm at the age now where, I've lost enough good folks in my life. And, one being my mom. The first real death I experienced was my mentor, Mr. Garrison, who had a tremendous impact on my life. And I think of that and I just think about, my mom and my dad raised me to understand that there is a higher being and to put our trust in God. But it can't just be here I am in the physical and then that's it. Like to me, there has to be more. And so my truth comes from the Bible and, knowing that, God put us in this position to be able to love one another, to be able to advance his word, advance his kingdom. And I have a unique perspective in that I actually grew up in a dual religious household, so I grew up going to Sunday school, but the day before I was in Arabic class writing right to left, and then be in Sunday school the next day writing left to right, and so I'd be in the mosque, I'd be at church. And it wasn't until I got to college where I made the decision that, I was going to follow Jesus Christ. But, before, like my freshman year of college and all the way to as young as I can remember, I identified as Muslim. Went through Ramadan. It was always cool to watch Akeem Olajuwon. I think when I first met you, it was just we talked about that. But he was one of the dudes that gave me strength to do Ramadan during basketball season. And it was extremely difficult because you're hungry. And I still remember, how empathetic my basketball coach, Willie West, was because he was hard. I mean, we ran a very big time, basketball program, and he would allow me in the evening to take 15 minutes to break my fast, kind of, so I'm not just shoving food in my mouth and getting right back on the court. Just take your time, break your fast, do what you got to do your prayers, and come back. And I did that. And you just don't find a lot of people who are that open to being able to allow people to practice their faith that way. And so, so anyways, I remember that moment, but, moving to now is just I think, to answer your question, that, I think it generates a lot more love in society when you have some sort of moral compass. And I do believe, in my own heart, this is just my opinion, that I'm seeing a lot less of that, and hence why we see more of this polarization in our society, where there's just this need to be right, this need to be, I gotta dominate you, this need to say I hate you, and there's just all of this mass confusion. And I feel like we've gotten further and further away from this moral compass that kind of drives this energy amongst all of us to love one another. Like, the greatest commandment in the Bible is to love thy neighbor. If you break it down, if there's nothing else you remember, you're going dang, I just have to love my neighbor. We can see things differently and still be able to love. Even if you look at the political climate, everybody go, well, if you are this and you believe this, I hate you. I can't. You're a what? You're a Republican. Oh my gosh, how could? Easy. It's cool. And maybe people look at me like, Akbar, I can't believe you think that way. I'm like, well, my mom and dad modeled it. My mom and dad, before my mom passed away, were married for 30-something years, and they were Muslim and Christian. Say, what? Can you imagine? Can you imagine a Muslim? And then you have 7 kids. Now I got to figure out how we're going to raise 7 kids in a Muslim Christian. And I just will never forget, the most powerful thing I ever saw was the fact that when we would do prayers, my father would always lead prayers, and he would lead it in Arabic. And then my mom would do prayers in Yoruba and in English, and, a Christian prayer. And that's how we would do prayer every day.
In 3 different languages.
In 3 different languages.
Yeah.
In 3 different languages. I didn't even think about that. But I was like, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, in 3 different languages. That's how we did prayer. And there was peace in our house. There was no jihad. There was no, all this fighting. Every now and again, my mom and dad would get down and they would talk about the differences between, the Quran and the Bible, but never to the point where it was a disruptive household. You know what I mean? It was all constructive.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which doesn't fit in with the narrative we're told, that there can't be any coexistence, there can't be any cooperation, whether it's between religions or political philosophies. It's we're fed this narrative where every sentence starts with, I believe this, I do this,
right.
I disagree with you, you are wrong. It's there's no we ever. It's not like we could do this, and that I think is a little unsettling. But
you know what? When you said that, you just reminded me of my wife and I, our marriage counselor, and sometimes those terms can be trigger words.
Sure.
You always, they send me these definitive, or you always, whoa, I don't always, and it's not you, but having the conversation to where it's not about you and I, right? And being able to expand that conversation, but it's become so personal. And I think a lot of it started with opinion media, where that has become so celebrated. Like, what's your opinion on this? And you hear hey, what do you think about this situation? I don't know. Does it help? Is it additive? Does it contribute to the overall conversation, or does it contribute to us becoming more and more divisive? And this is the one obstacle I pray that our society is able to overcome, is this idea that we need to put each other, you can't even be in the middle anymore. If you're in the middle, it's no, you got to pick a side. What if I told you I was politically on both sides? There's no way. Why not? Right? So
I think this is what your book gets at too, is on this show, and I grew up as a fan, just FYI. So it's awesome that we're sitting here talking about this. But you have people from a million different, you have every conceivable background.
Yes.
And this experience brings people together, and you just start to realize show after show, you're talking about all these backgrounds. We have so much more in common than we have different, Mm-hmm. We all, live in this country. We have our different communities. But, our common humanity is something that unites us more than it divides us. And I guess I'm just wondering, kind of as we're closing here, if there's one message that you want readers to walk away from this book with, what would it be?
Well, first off, conversations over confrontations, I think is a powerful message that allows people to grow and to appreciate each other. And then to be able to celebrate others. And I think that is the ninja mentality. That is the ninja spirit. I used to think when I was in the tower and I would see all of these ninjas supporting each other, and I was just thinking, well, that's just for the cameras, and they're just all cheering each other on. I'm like, nobody's that damn happy for each other outside of me, because I love to cheer other people. Maybe it was a competitive thing. Nobody can be that happy for other people, right? Because whatever reason. And when the cameras are off, when I've gone to travel to some of these other cities and I've been around these other ninjas and I've seen the community, here are ninjas who are competing for millions of dollars. There's only one. There's not like there's a team of people that can get a Super Bowl ring or a champion. There's only one person that at the end of the year that can become the American Ninja Warrior or the person who went the furthest. And yet they support each other, even if it means that they don't get the opportunity to continue on. If you really dig deep, you will really find that that's a very hard thing in society, is to see somebody else succeed. Even in the workplace, people can become very competitive. I've been in work environments where immediately people will see you and get intimidated and naturally will start to find ways to tear you down. They'll find, oh, look at his fault right there. Look at it. He doesn't do this right. He doesn't do that right. Oh, he doesn't do that. And they'll just do it until they can pick you apart to where they can get everyone else to kind of join in and go, yeah, he doesn't do that. Yeah, he's out of here or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that you don't see in the ninja community very often. You see this support, and I'm going, how is this possible? And I asked one of the ninjas, and he goes, you know what? Because we have more in common than we don't. And I just going, dang, that's right. And we all do. That's like, we all have way more in common than we don't, right? So
there we go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, the last question we always ask is if you have 3 book recommendations that you would want folks to check out, maybe based on this book, based on your life, things you think would be helpful for people to know.
One is I love Will Smith's book, his autobiography. I really, really, really connected with it. Here is one of the biggest stars on the planet. I don't know why. I think it was just Will Smith, right? Am I forgetting the title of his book? But it's his last autobiography book, and this massive insecurity that he had, and how he moved his way up, and how he even got the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I think that story to me resonated with me in a way that I think other people will find like, wow, like on the other side of fear is something magical. And I think there's a connection to this, to my book as well, in that same thing, being able to push past fear. Another one that I love is Barack Obama's autobiography as well. That one was a really good read for me. And what's another good book? Why I'm going to forget the name of it. It's Trevor Noah's book.
Born a Crime?
Born a Crime. Born a Crime is probably the dopest book I've ever read. And he just talks about his journey growing up in South Africa. And I think he speaks like 5 or 6 different languages, one of them being the Nkoso tribe. And he talks about one time about to be jumped, and he turns around because he's, half South African, half white, and turns around and starts speaking a different language, and they thought he was from a different tribe, and he just totally messed them up. And he goes, yeah, let's go jump these other dudes. But it was such a cool book. He's really a very intelligent guy. So Born a Crime is a really, really good book, I believe. So those are my 3 books right there to recommend.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Akbar, thanks so much for joining us today.
Josh, Sam, thank you guys for having me. This is really, really cool.
Thank you.
And thanks for the coffee too, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
If you'd like more information from us, check out the show notes or send us an email at podcast@villagewell.com. You can always order the books mentioned through our website. This episode of the Village Well podcast is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you next week, and keep reading.